Hey, before we start this podcast, I want to let you know that Kaki is sponsoring this video. Now, if you don't know what Kaki is a fantastic website where you can buy Thomas products that won't get you price gouged out of your mind. It's really good. I like it a lot. They have some really cheap items. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like, oh, it's poor quality. I mean like price-wise, French kiss. It is so good. They got everything from Play Rail to Erdl, Take Along, Wooden Railway. Now the cheap prices are great, but if you want to save even more money, you can use code PDP10 to save an extra 10% off your first order. And the money that you save using the code goes to supporting me as a creator, so thank you very much if you do that. Even if you don't want to use the code though, it is a fantastic website and I definitely recommend. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thank you Kaki for sponsoring the show. Link in the description. Now, on to the main event. Hello and welcome to the Analyzation Express, the show where I read and review a variety of Thomas content that I wouldn't be able to tackle in my normal videos. Today we have a story that I've actually been meaning to read for a while now. This was commented for me to look at all the way back when I posted my Breakvan video, way back when. That was like at the beginning of 2021, geez Louise. I believe it was posted by the person who wrote it, so you know, a little self-promotion in there, but I'm good with that, that's fine, I'm cool with that. And we're just gonna jump into it. Pretty much all I know about this is that it somehow relates to the twins coming to the island, and other than that, it's pretty much just a blank slate for me. So without further ado, let's dive in to chapter 1 and 2. Oh, and before I forget, this story was written by Railfan Brony Media on DeviantArt. The storm was raging outside the shed. 2 tank engines painted in dark gray were listening to it, wincing at every thunder crash or lightning strike. While their shapes were undoubtedly different, the only thing that told them apart was their numbers. Wait, what? Their shapes are different, but the only thing that you could tell them apart was their numbers. But couldn't you also tell them apart by their shape? Because the shapes are different? I don't understand. That's the 3rd storm we've had this year, the number 4 tank engine shuddered. I'm surprised there wasn't much damage in the second one. Indeed, the other one agreed. Just a few floods. I heard along the grapevine that a passenger train got stuck in one. I hope whoever was taking it came out all right, said number 4. Just then, they heard the sound of footsteps. Oh no, winced number 4. Our manager's coming. Okay, first little writing quirk that maybe this is just me, but this is always something that I've lived by, is that, because it says, they heard the sound of footsteps, new line, oh no, winced the same person who's talking. You don't have to like go down a line when someone new is talking unless there's like a big chunk of text in between there. You can just like keep it as one thing. It's only a couple sentences. You don't have to do a second line. Anyway, oh no, winced number 4, our manager's coming. Number 3 shot a glare in the footsteps direction, but much to his surprise, it was a thin gentleman with glasses and a bowler hat, not boiler hat. Thank you for the lift, Algie. Thank you for the lift, Algie, he called over his shoulder. Who's Algie? The thin gentleman walked into the shed and was very concerned to see the uneasiness of the engine's eyes. Are you two all right? He asked gently. Maybe put a comma between ask and gently. Not really, number 4 stammered, though we are glad you aren't our manager. The gentleman winced. You two must have had a rough time since you arrived here. That's quite an understatement, number 3 said quietly. What brings you here? And in the middle of a storm of all things? Well, I just got a message from one of the engines on the Northwestern Railway that your project isn't going very well, the gentleman explained. My railway needs a couple of new engines. My 2 engines need overhauls, you see. Are they in poor condition? Number 4 asked. The only reason why they aren't in the best conditions right now is because they were the only 2 engines running on the line for many years, the gentleman told them. It disheartens me to see them like this, and I wish to make things better for them. Number 3 and 4 exchanged a look. Hopeful smiles were adorned on their faces. You could just say adorned their faces. It's a little strangely worded, but it's not that big of an issue. So, said number 3 in a whisper, do you think this other railway could be? I think we're onto something, number 4 whispered back, and the 2 exchanged a wink. The engines turned their attention back to the gentleman. We'd be happy to come back with you, said number 3 gratefully. Anything to get us out of this horrible place. Of course. Who said of course? It just says of course. Just then, the manager of the 2 engines came up, and the gentleman walked over to him. Excuse me, he said. I've been looking for some new engines for my railway for a long time, and your engines are perfect. I hear the project has been going badly for quite some time. Perfect, grunted the manager. For scrap metal they are. I shouldn't laugh at that, but I do like that line. Just look at them. They were younger than the other engine I saw, and they deserve a chance, the thin gentleman said before the manager could finish his sentence. He didn't quite hear that last bit, but it may have been better in the long run if he had, and he didn't see number 3 and 4 glaring at their manager from further back. Yay, run-on sentences. How much will I be paying for them? I suppose 25 pounds each, the manager grunted. The thin gentleman promptly paid up and quickly called the Northwestern Railway for an engine to take them to Crovan's Gate. Once he was done, he headed over to the 2 engines. That was fast. Well, and $25 for 2 engines? Okay, that seems pretty cheap for a pair of tank engines. Now, he said kindly, tell me, what are your names? We can't call you by your numbers on my railway. It's been a long time, number 3 stammered. We haven't been called our old names since we got here. Even our nameplates have long since fallen off. And it would be a bit upsetting for us to be called by our old names, admitted number 4. The gentleman nodded kindly at them. Would you like some new names instead? Both engines gave small smiles, the engine equivalent of giving a small nod of their heads. I don't know if I like that. The engine equivalent of giving a small nod to their heads. I think you could have just said both engines gave small smiles. I don't know. I get what you were going for there, but it just seems a little bit repetitive. The gentleman thought hard. He had 2 old friends he often worked with when they were guards for the Skarloey Railway when they were young. Okay, he looked towards number 3. How about I call you Sir Handel? He then looked towards number 4. And you, Peter Sam. Both engines' faces shone like Christmas trees. Yes, please, they chimed together. Splendid, said the gentleman. My name is Mr. Percival, by the way, and Edward, one of Sir Topham Hatt's engines, is on the way with 2 trucks to collect you. This is all happening really fast. Like, isn't there like contracts to be signed? There must be like taxes or something you have to pay for acquiring engines like this. I feel like this is happening a little quick. I don't know. Like, I feel like if it would have been, he shows up, he says, "Ayo, how's it going? My name's Mr. Percival. I would like to buy you," and then like a few days go by. I don't know. This just feels like it's going by a little quickly. And a few minutes later, Edward's already here at the transfer yards with 2 flat trucks, and Judy and Jerome. That's a couple of name drops that only like 2% of people watching this are actually going to know what I'm talking about. The Judy and Jerome to lift the engines onto the flat trucks. The repetitive words are starting to get a little out of hand here. You're using flat trucks twice in the same sentence. But Sir Handel and Peter Sam were quick to catch on that Edward was clanking. Are you alright? Asked Peter Sam. Oh, just a couple of worn parts, the old engine explained. I'll probably need to be down at the steamworks sooner or later. I hope so, said Sir Handel as he was loaded onto a truck. We're meant to go there ourselves, so we look ready for our new workplace. You two will be fine additions to the Skarloey line, said Edward. Oh, I hear you both have names now. Mind telling me what they are? I'm Peter Sam, and he's Sir Handel. By now, Peter Sam was also loaded onto his truck. Oh, those names sound a bit fancy, chuckled Edward. Once they were tied down, Edward pulled them to Crovan's Gate. A few moments had gone by, and Edward's clanking had gotten worse. The arrival of a diesel engine and duck. What? The arrival of a diesel engine and duck getting into an accident had put Edward's overhaul on the back burner. Okay, so it's referencing a close shave. Cool. And he was in need of some new parts now more than ever. I hope Edward gets sent to the steamworks soon, said Thomas anxiously to Percy and Duck. I thought Duck he had an accident. Oh, I guess he could be back from his accident. The former of the 2 engines had brought some trains to Knapford from the Farquhar branch line and were waiting for their return journeys. He just can't go on like this. One of us will have to fill in for him while he's at the steamworks, said Duck. I'd be more than willing to help him out. You would be the most logical choice, Duck, said Percy, considering you worked on his branch line recently. Seems a little bit verbose coming from Percy. I could step in for you at the yards until Edward returns. Or maybe Julie and Katie could do that if they aren't preoccupied at the coal mines. Who are Julie and Katie? Do you think you and Toby will be alright, Thomas? Duck asked. The summer rush has dwindled by now, said Thomas. I think Toby and I can handle the branch line and split Percy's jobs between us up for a few days. He paused for a moment. Do you think the Midland engines could be going back home soon? The Midland engines? What? Who are they? Like, you're introducing characters that we haven't talked... They've been here for far longer than any of us, Percy put in. I don't think they'd want to leave. And with diesels around, added Duck, I'm worried that... The trio were interrupted by a loud whistle as James came backing onto the turntable. Here we go, remarked Duck quietly to Thomas and Percy. What's got your crank pins in a twist, James? Edward is impossible, James complained. He clanks about like a lump of old iron, and he's so slow he makes us wait. I was held up for 10 minutes at Wellsworth because of him today. The tank engine's cheeky faces quickly turned sour. Old iron, slow, snapped Percy. Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day, grunted Thomas. Have some empathy, would you, James? Duck agreed. Edward's been working around the clock just as much as the rest of us, if not more so. Again, a little wordy for my liking. That may be so, James snorted, but I'm sorry. Edward beat me in a race? Ha! He's not even the type of engine to race. And you of all engines should know that, Thomas. I'd like to see him do it. Why would Thomas of all engines know that? The engine said no more as James backed into the berth with a smug expression. Wait, what happened to Peter, Sam, and Sir Handel? How did we get... it took me like a solid minute to realize, hey, we just switched scenes. There's no break, or line or anything for that. How did we get to Thomas, Percy, and Duck and James? And now we're the next day. The next day, James woke up and noticed that his driver was looking rather pale. Driver, are you all right? James asked worriedly. Again, you gotta have a comma in there because it just says James asked worriedly. So it's like, if you put a comma, then it's like James asked in a worrying way. Without the comma, it's James asked worriedly, there's a character named worriedly. I'll be fine, he replied. I think I was watching my daughter do too many pirouettes in her ballet rehearsal last night. But as James finished taking his goods train, it was clear that his driver was not fine, and he nearly fell out of James's cab. Mate, you can't keep going on like this all day, said the fireman worriedly. Again, worriedly. You'll land yourself and a lot of others in danger if you do. You should rest up, said James, and go see a doctor if possible. James is oddly... he cares more about his driver's well-being than he does about Edward's, even though, you'd think Edward's like a colleague. I don't know. Seeing that he was outvoted, the driver decided to go inside to request to call his wife on the telephone to pick him up. It's worded a little strange. I think I would have said... Actually, I don't know how I'd word that. I'd have to think about that, but it just sounds a little bit broken. The fireman, meanwhile, went to uncouple James, ready to shunt the next train, and then went to the signal box to request a relief driver. Neither crew member nor the engine noticed a pair of boys saw James standing on the tracks doing nothing. Huh? You see him, Jake? The first boy asked, most likely the leader. There's two of them. How can he be the leader if there's... You can't lead one person. I mean, I guess he can. I'm just goofing around. It's one of those engines our parents speak to all the time. Oh, I see him too, Ned, said Jake. I've always wanted to see what it's like to be operating an engine. Well, the crew don't seem to be nearby, said Ned, so let's go for it. The boys quickly slipped into James's cab. How do you get him to move? Asked Jake. Maybe if we pull this lever, Ned suggested, and he touched the regulator. Pulling it wide open. Oh, Ned, you're gonna frickin' Grand Theft engine. Of course, that was what was needed to start James up, and because he still had his fire going, he started away. That relief driver came very quickly, James commented, but he didn't realize he accidentally knocked the boys off the footplate. Stupid frickin' kids. Oi, you kids, shouted the fireman. What have you done with my engine? Uh-oh, said Jake. I don't know about you, but I suggest we run. I don't think that's not an appropriate reaction. Okay, I've set a steam engine, a giant, 50-ton locomotive going out of the yard. If I was Jake right now, I would have shit my pants and said, let's get the hell out of here. I don't think I'd be like, I'd suggest we run. Right behind you, Jake, Ned cried. Way to out your friend there, Ned. The boys took off like rabbits. Oh, when I get my hands on them, the fireman growled as he walked back into the signal box to report the incident. All traffic halted, said the signalman after he hung up the telephone, changing the signals from green to red. Up and down the main line's been halted for 30 miles, and an inspector's coming. That's a relief, said the fireman, mopping his brow. The telephone rang again. Hello? Said the signalman. Yes, he's here. I'll tell him. He hung up. He needs a coil of wire rope and a shunter's pole. What will he need them for? Wondered the fireman. Search me, the signalman shrugged, but you better get them quickly. Edward was in the sheds when he heard the news sent from the inspector. Flatten my funnel, he cried. Jump into my cab. We better get going. The blue engine headed off to pick James's fireman up, who had the equipment needed. Hang on, James, said Edward with determination as he puffed away. I'm coming. Hang on, James, I'm coming. You can take that voice clip and use it for whatever you want, ladies and gentlemen. At Elsbridge, Toby and Henrietta were dropping off some passengers. I wonder if Sir Handel and Peter Sam are fully mended yet, Toby said. It can't be long now. Wait, how does Toby know about Sir Handel and Peter Sam? Why would Toby know about Sir Handel and Peter Sam? Indeed, Toby, agreed Henrietta. Though if what Thomas, Edward, and James have told us is true, they may have some difficulty adjusting. When did that happen? When did he tell them? I guess off screen, but it just seems a little strange. I'm sure Scarlowi and Rheneas will take things nice and slow for them, the tram engine assured. Just then, both Toby and Henrietta heard someone laughing and a streak of red zipping by. Was that James? Remarked Toby with surprise. And what in the world is he doing without a train? I have no idea, Henrietta replied. I don't think he's on his way to the steamworks at that speed. To further confuse the pair, Edward came rushing past as well, clanking much more loudly than he usually did so. You didn't have to add so there, I'm sorry. James, he called, please slow down, as if James had a choice. Just what is going on with James and Edward racing about like that? Toby wondered. Meanwhile, up ahead, again, I would have just put like a little divider between the Toby section and not. Okay, driver, you can slow me down now. But surprisingly, there was no reply or movement from his cab. Driver? Fireman? One of you. James's eyes widened when he realized what was going on. Oh no, what shall I do? I can't stop. Help! Just then, the red engine heard a whistle coming from behind him. Edward? I'm coming, the old engine panted. I know that I shouldn't be laughing about that. I know what he means, and I know I shouldn't take that out of context. But gosh dang it, I'm gonna take it out of context. James could tell he was using every ounce of steam he had. Steady on there, Edward, said his driver soothingly. That just reinforces my ultimate headcanon on how this scene is going. By now, the red and blue engines were level with each other. Keep him steady, said the inspector, and he got out of his cab, tying the wire rope over Edward to keep his balance. He then slipped the rest of the rope onto the shunter's pole and made a noose in the rope. Rope. He was trying to slip the noose over James's buffer. Come on, the inspector groaned as the engine swayed and lurched. If I could just... Yes, we got him, he shouted and pulled the noose tight. Edward's driver checked the engine's speed and gently braked the blue engine, while James's firemen quickly scrambled across to the red engine and took control. Now James was at a manageable speed and Edward's crew were able to slow him down too. So, Edward chuckled, catching his breath. The old iron caught you after all. I'm sorry, Edward, whispered James, and thank you for saving me. You were splendid. Just glad to help a fellow engine, he replied. Both engines pulled up at Kelstorp Road side by side. You and I both know that I don't know where that is. A fine piece of work, Sir Topham Hatt commended. James, after what you've been through this morning, you can rest before you take your next train. Thank you, sir, panted James gratefully. And Edward, continued Sir Topham Hatt, I am proud of your bravery and prompt actions. I don't think you had a choice, my guy. It's clear to me that you've been feeling worn down these past few months, so it's high time I sent you to the steamworks to have your worn parts mended. Oh, thank you, sir, smiled Edward. It will be lovely not to clank. Soon, the two engines were untied from each other and gave each other a farewell whistle before Edward headed to Crovan's Gate, which was not far away from Kelstorp Road. That's not a detail that you had to add. You could have just said he headed to Crovan's Gate. Skarloey, Rheneas, smiled Edward as he saw the little engines. How are you both doing today? And again, like, you gotta have a break, like either dashes or something. Just have like something to like indicate that there's a new page here, because he's just here now. Anyway, how are you both doing today? Said Edward to Skarloey and Rheneas. Feeling better now that 2 new engines have been bought for our line, smiled Rheneas. Rheneas, you're not supposed to be here. You should be away getting mended. I'm glad to hear that, said Edward. I hope the other engines can manage while I'm getting repaired. I wish we could be repaired as soon as possible too, sighed Skarloey. It doesn't do an engine much good if they're stuck in the sheds all day waiting to be fixed up. Don't worry, old friend, said Edward. I'm sure that day will be coming very soon. The blue tender engine thought that changing the topic would lighten Skarloey's mood. How are your coaches doing? Any changes in their behaviors? He added with a chuckle. That's a strange topic to change things to, okay. Oh, not really, Skarloey chuckled back. Agnes is still acting like she's above the rest of the coaches, and Ruth, Lucy, and Jemia complain dreadfully. They complain even more if we leave someone behind, but always take Beatrice along, added Rheneas. Tickets and the guard are more important after all. Of course, Edward agreed. And you said there's a passenger that always tends to run late. Mrs. Last, Rheneas laughed. Oh yes, the guard always jokes that we'll leave her behind one of those days, but we know that'll never happen. And then there's market day, Skarloey added. The guard sometimes lets third-class passengers ride in Agnes. Let's just say that ruffles her feathers all the time. But we always put her in her place, Rheneas put in. What do you do? Asked Edward. We threaten to bump her, Skarloey replied. Although, just between the 3 of us, we wouldn't really. The passengers wouldn't like that. Just then, some workmen arrived. Come along now, Edward, said one of them. You're wanted at the works now. Understood, the blue engine replied. Thank you for talking to me, Skarloey and Rheneas. Thank you for chatting with us too, said Skarloey. You've cheered us up, Edward. With a final blow of his whistle, Edward was inside the steamworks to have his worn parts replaced. As he did so, he would notice Sir Handel and Peter Sam. They were just about ready to enter service. Their new paint was just drying out. Sir Handel was now blue, and Peter Sam was green. They had their nameplates off to the side, ready to be put on. Those colors look much better on you than that dull gray from a few months ago, said Edward. A few months went by? Holy smokes, we fell through a hole in time. Thank you, said Sir Handel. I personally think so too. Indeed, agreed Peter Sam. I think it's funny we kept our old numbers from the Peel Godred works. We also had these numbers on... He cut himself off. It's okay, Edward said gently. You don't have to talk about whatever's on your mind if you don't want to. With Edward at the steamworks, this meant the engines had more to deal with. As James and Duck were light enough to run on branch lines, they took it in turns to handle the Blue Engine's trains from Brenham branch line. Johnson and Julie, who I still don't know who they are, were called in to do their best jobs on the main line. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do some Googling. Johnson and Julie, Thomas and friends. I need to know who they are. Okay, so I just Googled it. Johnson and Julie, they aren't. So I guess that answers that question. They were called to do jobs on the main line. Oh, those twins who work at the clay pits, complained James. They've hidden some of my trucks again. Those two gave me quite the runaround when I first met them too, agreed Duck when he met James at Knapford. They made me think they were the same engine who kept popping up all over the place, as if by magic. Duck, come on, you must be smarter than that. How does Edward handle them? James grunted. They're almost as badly behaved as that diesel. I personally wouldn't go that far, said Duck, but at least they never spread lies. No, but they do hide trains and... Wait a minute, they did lie to you, Duck. They just said that they made you think they were the same engine. The twins had actually been very sympathetic when they heard about Duck's plight with Diesel, and stopped tricking him for the rest of his time on the branch line until the accident with the barbershop. After the accident with the barbershop, it was gung-ho from there. The worst that they do is give off misleading directions. I would have just said give misleading directions, which is still also lying. Just then, Gordon came in with the express. There's so much to do, he grumbled. We'll need another engine at the rate we're going. Scratch that, said Duck. We may need two, especially with Edward at the steamworks. We may need to tell Sir Topham Hatt, said James. Where is he anyway? Well, here he is, said a familiar voice. I'm aware that you all work hard, but you are right. Another engine is needed. Most likely one that can work on the main line and the branch lines. Sir Topham Hatt then returned to his office to see if one was available, and eventually he did find one. But we'll have to end this chapter here, for we may spoil the rest of the story. Okay, that was chapter 1. I'm going to save my thoughts until we get to the end of chapter 2, but so far, not a bad start. Bit of a wordy start, but not a bad one. Chapter 2, more coach trouble. Let me get this straight. You're saying that instead of one engine, I've had two arriving. That's right, said the inspector. They're both nearly here, just passing by Elsbridge now. How would he know that they're passing by Elsbridge? Well, when they do arrive, check their numbers, said Sir Topham Hatt. We've ordered number 57646. Send the other one back. Of course, sir. The inspector soon returned in less than an hour. He left? Why didn't you say he left? Looking rather flustered. We've got a problem, sir. The two engines are exactly alike, and they claim they've lost their numbers on their way from the Scottish region. From the you mean Scotland? Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about Scotland? Is that so? Said Sir Topham Hatt, seizing his top hat. We'll soon settle this nonsense. The two engines waiting for Sir Topham Hatt both had 6 driving wheels, long tenders, and black paint. Ah, good morning, sir, greeted the one on the left. It's a pleasure to meet you, added the one on the right. Sir Topham Hatt noticed that the one on the right had a bit more of a softer voice than the one on the left. I feel like that exposition could have been dealt a little better. It's nice to meet the two of you, he said, but I want to cut to the chase. I hear you've lost your numbers on the way, so which one of you is 57646? That, sir, is just something we canna remember, said the engine on the left. Sir Topham Hatt looked at the engine's solemn faces before speaking again. Okay, do you have names then? Donald and Douglas, sir, they said. Good, then your controller can tell me which one of you is which. Ach, you'll get no muckle help from him, sir, said Douglas. He doesn't know our names, sir. How could he? Added Donald. We only given ourselves names once we lost our numbers. Huh, is that so? Said Sir Topham Hatt with a raised eyebrow. One of you must be playing truant. I shall find out who it is. But in the meantime, Inspector, he ordered. The inspector's with him now. That's a thing that the original book did too, where he's like, Inspector, yo, where you at, boy? And the inspector has not been mentioned, and then he's just there. Give Donald and Douglas their numbers and set them to work. Gordon, meanwhile, oh, Now we're with Gordon, okay. Was about to take off with the express as usual. How peculiar, he said quietly. I thought only one engine was coming. Don't think those thoughts, don't think those thoughts, don't think those thoughts. But I don't see why Sir Topham Hatt is so upset. 2 smoke boxes are better than 1. Meanwhile, on the Skarloey Railway, we're just switching scenes again. You can't do this to me, guy. We're just changing all over the place. Where even is Gordon right now? Meanwhile, on the Skarloey Railway, the new engines had finally come out of the steamworks. Their nameplates were bolted on, and they were now surveying the shed. What a small shed, complained Sir Handel. We're much too smart for this old shack. I think it looks nice, said Peter Sam. Much better than what we were sleeping under at Peel Godred. I suppose you have a point, Sir Handel sighed. He then caught sight of 2 old engines. But what's that rubbish? Excuse me, Rheneas said indignantly. Peter Sam had a horrified look on his face. Shh, that's Skarloey and Rheneas, he whispered. They're famous. He whispered something else to Sir Handel, which seemed to shut him up. He looked over at the 2 old engines. I'm sorry about this. Sir Handel is usually much nicer than this. I'm Peter Sam, by the way. Edward mentioned something about having a rough time, Skarloey said quietly. Wait, what? He decided to change the topic. I see you were both named after 2 of Mr. Percival's old friends. That's quite an honor. Oh, thank you, Skarloey, said Peter Sam. It's much better than having your number called out all the time. I can't believe you both didn't have names back then, Rheneas sighed. That was cruel of your manager. That's a bit of an understatement, said Sir Handel, having recovered from his earlier outburst. He wouldn't keep us properly maintained, would scold us if we were so much as a minute late, and the cherry on top was... The Blue Engine couldn't bring himself to say it, and he and Peter Sam exchanged a heartbroken look. The 2 engines didn't know exactly what was going on, but they knew the wounds within the younger engines were very deep. Back at the yards, we're back at the... We're trying to cover too many stories at once here, like, pick one story for a chapter. Back at the yards, Donald and Douglas had their British Railway logos painted over and were given new numbers, Donald 9 and Douglas 10. You may have noticed, Dougie, said Donald, that yon painters have brand new numbers on our tenders. Aye, they did. And they look great, Douglas agreed. But they paint none on us, right? Trust you to catch on quickly, chuckled Donald. And that means we can... The twins exchanged a wink, as Douglas had a nervous look in his eyes. You sure this idea will work? He said quietly. Maybe it was best if I... Denny say that, Donald said firmly. 'Twas both of us or none. You're my brother, Dougie. And that argument we have will change that. Hold your wish, said Donald's driver. Yon's the inspector. Act casual. The inspector addressed the twins by their numbers. Now, 9 and 10, this is Duck. He'll show you around the yards before you start work. Duck came up to the twins with a smile. Good morning, you two. What were your names again? I'd much rather call you by that. I'm Donald. And I'm Dougie. Well, nice to meet you, Donald and Douglas, said Duck. I don't know how he got Douglas from Dougie, but hey, Duck, you do you. Likewise, Duke, said Douglas. No, what are we supposed to do? Well, Henry and James have passenger trains due out soon, said Duck. If you can handle them, I can put back the trucks Henry's brought in. The twins agreed and quickly set to work. I'm glad 2 engines came instead of 1, said Duck, as he tended to the trucks. I didn't know Sir Topham Hatt was sending for 2. A surprise for us, I suppose. Donald and Douglas handled the coaches and trucks with absolute ease. The trucks knew better than to try any tricks once the twins had shunted them. Well done, said Duck. Some engines have quite a bit of trouble with the trucks. Ach, them buggers dinna get muckle Oh geez, that's a lot of Scottish. Ach, them buggers dinna give us much trouble back on our own line, said Donald. Aye, agreed Douglas. We swore some trucks had shaky wheels once we got near 'em. Oh, and take my tip, said Duck, completely changing the subject just randomly for no reason. Watch out for 4 and 5, Gordon and James respectively. They mean no harm, really, but they do try some nonsense every once in a while. Not Henry, though. Henry is a good boy. Better fast yourself, chuckled Donald. We'll soon settle them. I can't wait to listen back to my bastardization of a Scottish accent and just either burst into laughing or cringe. Back on the Skarloey Railway, the 4 little engines had gotten well acquainted with each other, but Skarloey and Rheneas were quite sure that the younger engines were hiding something from them. They didn't have much time to question it when Mr. Percival showed up. Okay, now that the 4 of you have gotten acquainted, said Mr. Percival, Sir Handel, you'll take the passenger run. I'm tired, sighed Sir Handel. Let Peter Sam go, he'll love it. No, you're first, said Mr. Percival firmly. Oh well, the dark blue engine muttered. I suppose I must. Sir Handel's crew started him off, and he went off to the coachyard while Mr. Percival strolled away. The elder engines looked baffled, but Peter Sam had a worried look in his eyes. I think he misses the railway we were on before Peel Godred, he explained. He's been homesick since we left there. Skarloey and Rheneas winced at Peter Sam's words. When Sir Handel came to collect the old coaches, Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jeremiah, and Beatrice! He was far from thrilled. Whatever next, he fumed. You call these coaches? They look more like cattle trucks. Oh, cried Ruth, what a horrid engine. How dare he call us such names, agreed Agnes. Her voice seemed much louder than the others. Now, said Lucy quietly. You heard what the other new engine said. He's homesick. We can't be too hard on him. Wait, so the coaches said that they heard what the other new engine said to Skarloey and Rheneas. Either A, they have excellent hearing, B, time is a little wibbly-wobbly in the story, or C, they are right next to Skarloey, Rheneas, and Peter Sam, so how did Sir Handel not hear Peter Sam talking to them? Now, said Lucy quietly. You heard what the other new engine said. He's homesick. We can't be too hard on him. What? Muttered Jeremiah sleepily. What'd that engine say? Never mind, it's Gemia, pardon me. Never mind, Gemia, sighed Beatrice. Gemia had become near deaf in her older years, though it's never been known exactly how or why. It's not what I'm used to, Sir Handel muttered as he was coupled up to the coaches and dragged them out to the station platform. How dare he be rude to our old dears, snapped Rheneas. They've been keeping this railway running just as long as us. I don't suppose there's any explanation for this one, asked Skarloey. Our bogie coaches were sold off a few years ago before our line closed, Peter Sam explained. The four-wheeled coaches probably brought back memories of our old railway's decline. I suppose that sort of makes sense, sighed Rheneas, though he was still angry at Sir Handel. Meanwhile, the dark blue engine pulled up to Crovan's gate just as Gordon pulled up with the express. Hello, greeted the express engine. You must be one of the new engines that was rescued a few months back. My name is Gordon. I'm Sir Handel, said the dark blue engine. I've heard all about you. You're an express engine, I believe. I was one too, a long time ago, though I'm used to bogie coaches, not these cattle trucks. Do you have bogie coaches? He took a quick glance at Gordon's coaches. I see you do. We must have a chat sometime. Just then, the guard's whistle blew. Sorry, I can't stop. Must keep the time, you know. Sir Handel chuffed away proudly, leaving Gordon feeling speechless. And I thought I was a proud express engine, he thought in his mind. Come along, puffed Sir Handel importantly. Cattle trucks, fumed Agnes. I won't stand for such an insult. It's time we taught this pompous fool a lesson in humility. But what about our passengers? Said Lucy reasonably. They won't like that. As much as I don't like this engine insulting us, Ruth put in. Lucy does have a point, Agnes. The passengers will say that it's a bad railway and not come back. Gemia snored loudly. She had fallen asleep again as the journey progressed. Oh, Gemia. Besides, added Beatrice, Rheneas has only managed to save our railway a few months ago. Is that worth the risk? Sir Handel didn't hear the whole conversation, but he did catch the part about Rheneas saving the railway. This railway was almost shut down too? He said under his breath. Great railway forbid. I'd hate to know what would happen if both lines failed to survive. Presently, the six of them stopped at a station. The line curved here and began to climb. It wasn't steep, but it was very misty, which made it slippery. All right, girls, whispered Agnes. When I say now, we hold back. Some of the coaches still had doubts on the plan. I thought you guys just said that you weren't gonna fuck with him. Why are you now deciding to fuck with him? Mostly due to the fact that Sir Handel had been quiet throughout most of the journey. But they dreaded to think about what Agnes would say if they didn't go through with it. The guard's whistle blew and Sir Handel started to climb. Just what I needed, he said to himself. Climbing. Just then, Sir Handel didn't see the curved track ahead of him. Instead, he saw the track curving all around a mountain. And instead of the four-wheeled coaches, he had two bogie coaches. Oh, I see, it's a flashback. Okay. Many houses and engines below looked like tiny toys, and he smiled. Hello down there, he chuckled. I'll be back down sooner or later. But then he felt a sharp jerk on his back coupling. Huh? Sir Handel snapped out of his fantasy to realize that the coaches were holding him back. Oh, come on, he growled, trying to pull the train uphill. His wheels spun helplessly. Come on now. I can't do it. I'm used to sensible bogie coaches, not these cattle trucks. Just then, the guard came up. Bother these coaches, he grunted. No doubt Agnes sent them up to this. Just knew immediately, I guess. He glared at her. I shall speak to you later. The first-class coach gulped, which caused her to release her tension on the coupling. Wait, how was she stopping? The coaches surely wouldn't have, brakes. Would they have brakes? They're not trucks. Maybe they would have brakes. I don't know. I'm not a railway expert, so I wouldn't know. And the other coaches quickly followed suit. I suggest we go down to a level piece of track, said the driver, and put sand on the rails. So that's what they did. Once plenty of sand had been dropped so he could get a grip, Sir Handel began to climb the hill once more, hoping to make up for lost time. I've got to hurry, he said to himself. I can't lose more time than what I have already. The coaches obediently followed him this time. Agnes was completely silent for the rest of the journey. At last, Sir Handel made it to the top station without further delay. Thank goodness for that, he sighed. The return journey also didn't give Sir Handel any trouble, but Mr. Percival had a stern look on his face when he got back to the sheds that evening. You are a troublesome engine, he snapped. You are rude and conceited, and much too big for your wheels. Next time, I shall punish you severely. I wonder if his new name went to his smoke box, Rheneas whispered to Skarloey as Mr. Percival walked away. Most likely, Skarloey admitted. I'd hate to imagine what would happen if he was named after someone noble like a king or a duke or something. The old engine failed to notice a quick facial glance between Sir Handel and Peter Sam. It's getting late, Peter Sam said quickly. Why don't we get some sleep? Everyone agreed to that idea. Now we're back to the standard gauge stuff. As Donald and Douglas backed into Tidmouth sheds, they blew their whistles, deep in tone. Listen to them, James, said Gordon. They sound like buses on rails. Rail ships would be more accurate, joked James. Tugboat Annie, laughed Gordon. I wouldn't say those things if I were you, said Henry quietly. Donald and Douglas were on berths either side of Gordon and James, and creeped up quietly to them. You wouldn't be making fun of us, would you now? Asked Donald, his voice dangerously calm. Gordon and James glanced nervously from side to side. No, said Gordon. No, certainly not, agreed James. That's fine, said Douglas. No, just mind bath yourselves, and keep it that way. Told you, Henry said quietly. Gordon and James remained silent for the rest of the evening. A few days later, Sir Handel... I'm getting whiplash at this point. Sir Handel had taken the coaches up to the top station. All right, Sir Handel, said his driver. We'll leave the coaches here and pick up some trucks from the quarry. Trucks! Cried Sir Handel. Yes, that's right, replied the driver. Trucks. Sir Handel seemed to close his eyes, thinking back. He was taking some trucks one day, back on the Peel Godward project. This had been in his earliest days. But during his trip, he felt a massive bump. Whoa, he cried. Suddenly, he felt something loose on his sides, and heard two clatters. Oh, bust my boiler, he stopped and looked. My nameplates! Oh, they're badly damaged now. Just from getting bumped once caused his nameplates to get messed up? Okay. He opened his eyes, looking very upset and angry. I won't, he snapped. So there. He puffed forward and somehow managed to push the rails apart, derailing himself. Told you. I've never understood that. How did he push the rails apart? That's like one of the few questions that everyone who's ever read the Railway series, not seen the episode, but read the actual books, has asked since the beginning of time. What is he doing to push the rails apart here? Now what? Groaned the fireman, mopping his brow. I'll call for help, said the driver, rushing to the nearest phone box. Sir Handel didn't feel so proud once Peter Sam came to help him back onto the rails again. And on his train was Mr. Percival. The little green engine just gave Sir Handel a disappointed glance as their controller walked over. You're a very naughty engine, Sir Handel, he said sternly. You will stay in the shed till I can trust you to behave. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir, the dark blue engine stammered nervously. He felt rather silly. Peter Sam was then tasked to take over from Sir Handel as the latter headed straight back to the sheds. The old engines were still there, both very disappointed. What were you trying to do? Snapped Rheneas. Get us closed again? No, Sir Handel stammered. I've always had trouble with trucks, so You didn't even try, Skarloey cut in. Sir Handel sighed. Yes, I derailed before I could get to the quarry, on purpose. Sir Handel, Skarloey said. Look, I know that what you've been going through is very tough. You lost your old line, got sent to a project that had a toxic manager. Was toxic a word that people were using back in the mid-1900s? And now you've had to adjust to a new line all over again. But you must give everything a try, or else things may end up turning sour here too. Sir Handel didn't say anything, but looked down at his buffers. He had a lot to think about. Now you'd think that's where the story ends, but no, we still got another paragraph, boyos. Meanwhile, at Knapford, Douglas had offered to do pilot duties for Duck while the pannier tank engine arranged Donald's good train. His good train. Your railway is just wonderful, said Douglas as he shunted some coaches into a siding. I could definitely get used to this. So could I, agreed Donald as he was taking on water. I'm just glad to hear that from you two, smiled Duck. We definitely need two engines, especially since Edward's at the steamworks at the moment, and the Midland engines could go back at any time. What Midland engines? Donald and Douglas exchanged a look. The steamworks. You know your engines is there, asked Douglas. Then what do you mean about the Midland engines? Added Donald. The steamworks are main repair facilities at Crovan's Gate. The steamworks, I think you're missing, there's a word missing there, is where the little engines live, explained Duck. Edward's been sent there because he'd been making a lot of clanking noises lately. Well, that's good he's being mended, said Donald, trying not to let his temper show. Why is Donald's temper showing? And for the Midland engines, they're on a long-time loan, Duck went on, and their jobs are getting a bit more inconsistent. The coal mine's slowly been declining, and other engines are taking up positions on the branch lines and main line. Duck was about to say something else when he glanced over at the clock. Oh, Douglas, I just remembered. James is coming in with Edward's train. Could you shunt his empty coaches onto the siding, please? Aye, said Douglas, and Duck puffed off to find some more trucks. As soon as the tank engine was gone, Douglas looked over at Donald. If in there are no engines to be fixed, could that be why Sir Topham Hatt kept us both on for the moment? That's as can be, Dougie, said Donald. But nothing will happen to us, you'll see. How can you be so sure? Douglas asked anxiously. You know us could be sent back at random, and the Midland engines could be going back at any time. I will take matters into my own buffers should Sir Topham Hatt consider that possibility, Donald said firmly. The twins were so engrossed in their conversation that they hadn't noticed Thomas coming into the station with Annie and Clarabelle in tow. Another smooth run, the tank engine smiled as he gently braked. He felt that his bunker was very light. Oh, cinders and ashes, I'm low on coal. You stay here, girls. I'll be right back. Thomas's driver uncoupled him and he puffed away to the coal tower. Coal tower? Coal tower. Annie and Clarabelle decided to take a quick nap before their engine returned. Oh, the hot weather makes me sleepy, yawned Annie. Me too, agreed Clarabelle. Unbeknownst to them, Douglas had arrived to take away James's coaches when he spotted Annie and Clarabelle on the platform. That's funny, remarked Douglas. I didn't recall these coaches being there. Might as well shunt them away with the others. Douglas gently buffered up to Annie and Clarabelle, so gently in fact that the coaches didn't even wake up. He carefully shunted Annie, Clarabelle, and the old coaches into a siding. The old coaches? I thought there were only two. I hope Sir Topham Hatt doesn't find out I shouldn't be here, Douglas said under his breath. I can't abide going back. Trying to push that thought out of his mind, Douglas, now revealed to be the younger twin, went to join Donald at the water column. Now revealed to be the younger twin. You didn't... Another line that does not need to be there. You could take that out and it would be fine. It wasn't long before Thomas came back to the station, only to find the vacant platform where Annie and Clarabelle stood. Annie? Clarabelle? He called anxiously and blew his whistle. Where are you? He bustled out of the station. Help! Someone's kidnapped my coaches! Annie and Clarabelle had heard Thomas's whistle from where they now sat and woke up, surprised at their surroundings. What? How did we end up here? Exclaimed Annie. This isn't some dream, is it? Cried Clarabelle. If we close our eyes, said Annie, maybe we can open them again and we'll be at the platform. Flawless logic right there. So they did for about a moment or two, but when they opened their eyes again, no, we're still stuck in this siding, wailed Clarabelle. Ha, laughed Hillary on the side. Who's Hillary? Maybe Thomas has decided to get new coaches to replace you. Oh, be quiet, Hillary. Who's Hillary? Dexter from the Big World, Big Adventures show? Oh, be quiet, Hillary, snapped Dexter from the Bad Order track. I don't know what that means. He glanced over at Annie and Clarabelle with compassion. Don't panic, girls. I'm sure this was an honest mistake. Thomas will find you. At least someone's nice to us, sighed Annie. Those three should learn some manners. Those three? Which three? Back at the water tower, Donald and Douglas heard Thomas's frantic whistle. Losh sakes, gasped Donald. The twin Bruin coaches must have been the tank engines. There was more trouble. Thomas's next train was due out, and the passengers were complaining about the absence of coaches on the platform. What kind of railway doesn't have coaches ready when you need them? A particularly grumpy passenger complained. Back in the Midland region, we would never do a stunt like this. Och nay, groaned Donald. 'Twas a gone say well, and now I've gone and muckled everything up. Dougie, you're in no shape to be confronted right now, said Donald firmly. I will take the blame. But Donny, your goods. Ye take it, Donald argued. You'll need some time to calm down. And so it was arranged. Douglas was coupled up to Donald's goods train, while Donald would wait in the siding should he be confronted as to what just happened. What no one had noticed was that the twins had swapped tenders around. Donald was now with Douglas's tender, 10, and Donald was away with the goods train with Donald's tender, 9. Why did they switch tenders though? Why didn't Douglas just take the goods train? Sir Topham Hatt arrived and addressed Douglas, in quotes, by his number. Ah, number 10, he said. What's happened to Thomas's coaches? I accidentally shunted them into the siding, sir. The Scottish engine tried his best to mimic the softer tone of his twin. I'm sorry, I thought they were James's. Technically Edwards. Coaches. I'm sorry, I thought they were James's dash technically Edwards dash coaches. I get what you were trying to go for there, but I see, said Sir Topham Hatt. Although, why has your tender become detached, and why did number 9 race off so quickly? There's a defeat in my tender that just happened, Donald explained. Now, as for my brother, maybe he saw you coming and thought it was late. Said Sir Topham Hatt. He turned to a couple of passengers. Here are the facts. Number 10 has been shunting in the yard. Your coaches disappeared. In our investigation, we see that number 10 is currently not in working order. You can draw your own conclusions. Please accept my apologies. We shall investigate this matter. Good afternoon. The passengers seemed content with the controller's answer, and they walked back up to the station platform. Sir Topham Hatt twitched his shoulders. Are you a rat, sir? Asked Donald. He bit his lip when he realized he'd forgotten to keep his act, and his normal deep-toned voice came back. Sir Topham Hatt swung around with a mixture of surprise and anger. Donald, he cried, what are you doing masquerading with Douglas's tender? Donald couldn't say anything, but then he grew even more horrified when he heard a shout from the sidings. Annie and Clarabelle! And that was the first 2 chapters of Never Be Alone by Railfan Brony Media. I will be covering the rest of this story next week, so look out for that, but as these 2 chapters are on their own, you know what? They're not that bad. I said that they were a little clumsily written, and I do stand by that. However, some of that stuff I will admit might just be my own personal writing quirks, like having commas after someone said a thing in a manner. So like someone said something worriedly, then yeah, I would have a comma between said and worriedly, just because it breaks things up a little bit. This story definitely takes heavy inspiration from basically everything that it can. It's like 1 part TV series, 1 part RWS, and 1 part CGI series, and I'd say it meshes things together for the most part fairly well. It does have a few little continuity things, like I don't know if Edward goes to the works after Duck gets messed on by the train in A Close Shave. Maybe that's some weird, funky timeline stuff, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure A Close Shave comes after Old Iron. I don't mind the switching around of the story, so that's not a big negative against it. I do think that the story is a little bit exposition-y at points, but not in the way you might think. Now, usually when you think of stories being exposition-y, you think of people saying stuff and telling you what the audience needs to know. But this story is more like the narrator telling you the stuff that the audience needs to know. And honestly, I feel like it's not so bad in concept, but in practice, some of these little details that they've had, they could have been handled a little bit better. Like there's one part where Donald slips up and he starts speaking not as Douglas, but as himself. And I feel like that little bit of dialogue could have been handled a little bit better. The same thing with the twins switching tenders could have been just written a little bit more coherently. But honestly, other than that, I don't mind it. The only other big thing I have to say about it is that I don't really like how suddenly we're at one scene and then we're at another scene and then we're at another scene. And there's no breaks in between it. Like things just kind of happen in the story. That part I'm not such a big fan of. I think that if you're going to have scene changes, you need to have an indication of a scene change, whether that be dashes to form a line, or if you want to use the little shift 8 stars, asterisks, that's the word. If you want to use those, that's good too. There's a lot to like in the story. I really like how they actually give a reason for Sir Handel being kind of a dick. It's not just like, fuck Sir Handel like it is in the books and the show, where Sir Handel's just unlikable because of course he is. That's one thing that I feel like the books never really grabbed a hold of as well as they could have, is just giving these characters a reason to be the way that they are. Like obviously you can connect the dots together and say, oh well, Sir Handel was upset because he missed Duke, or he missed his old line or whatever, or they were treated poorly in the old place. Honestly, I like that line of thinking, but because it's not written down in the actual book, you don't have that information at the ready, and so it kind of just comes across as Sir Handel's being a dick because of course he is. Now, in the same breath, I don't understand why Sir Handel was being scolded when he came back with the passenger train. That part I think feels a little bit random. Like he didn't have any issues once he actually, got going with it. I mean, he slipped on the slope, but that wasn't his fault. The coaches were playing tricks on him. I feel like that might have been a little strange, especially with how Rhaenyra and Skarloey just immediately jump on him. Sure, he did yell at the coaches, but I don't know, feels a little bit weird. Other than that, I really do like this story, despite its shortcomings. I don't think that the shortcomings are super bad. I really like the ideas, and I'm interested to see where this story goes next. So next week, we're gonna finish off Never Be Alone and see where things go from here. Until then, this has been the Analyzation Express, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.